My name is Sammy, 62 years old, and I built my life from nothing as a construction worker. My only daughter, Amanda, who I raised alone after my wife passed, just got married. I found out through Facebook photos. She never told me, never invited me. After everything I sacrificed for her education and future, this was how she repaid me. The pain was unbearable, but what happened next shocked me even more. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about family betrayal and the healing that follows. I grew up in a small town in Michigan where opportunities were as scarce as rain in a drought. By 16, I was already working construction, learning to build with my hands, while my classmates were focused on football games and proms. Hard work was all I knew. My father had been a construction worker too, and he taught me that a man is measured by the calluses on his hands and the integrity in his heart. In my mid-20s, I met Janet at a local diner where she worked as a waitress. She had the warmest smile that could melt the Michigan winter and a laugh that made everyone around her happy. We fell in love quickly, and within a year, we had a small but beautiful wedding in my parents' backyard. Nothing fancy, just honest love between two people ready to build a life together. 3 years later, our daughter Amanda was born. The day the nurse placed her in my arms was the happiest of my life. This tiny human with Janet eyes and my stubborn chin became my whole world in an instant. I remember promising her right there in the hospital room that I would give her the best life possible no matter what it took. Life was good for a while. Janet and I bought a small house that needed work, but I was happy to fix it up on weekends. Amanda grew into a curious, bright little girl who loved to follow me around with her toy hammer, insisting on helping Daddy work. Those were simple days, filled with family dinners, bedtime stories, and weekend trips to the lake. Then everything changed when Amanda was 7. Janet started getting headaches that would not go away. At first we thought it was just stress or needing new glasses. By the time we got a proper diagnosis of brain cancer, it was already too late. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 4. I still remember holding Janet's hand in the hospital as she made me promise to take good care of our little girl. That was her final request before she slipped away. That night, I had to go home and explain to Amanda that Mommy was never coming back. Watching her little face crumple in grief nearly broke me, but I knew I had to be strong for her sake. Suddenly, I was a single father with a full-time construction job and a grieving daughter. Those first few years were a blur of packed lunches, rushed mornings, and falling into bed exhausted every night. My parents helped when they could, but they were getting older and had their own health problems. Most days it was just Amanda and me against the world. I remember teaching her to ride a bike in the empty parking lot of her elementary school. She fell so many times, scraping her knees and elbows, but she never gave up. That determination reminded me so much of Janet. When she finally managed to pedal on her own, the look of pure joy on her face made all the struggle worthwhile. School projects were always a challenge for us. I am not artistic or particularly patient, but I would sit at our kitchen table for hours, helping Amanda with her science fair projects or history dioramas. Her 4th grade volcano actually erupted all over our kitchen ceiling, leaving a brown stain that became a favorite story to tell visitors. Amanda's first day of school each year was a ritual for us. I would take the morning off work, make her favorite blueberry pancakes, and take a photo of her on our front porch with her new backpack. Even when she became a teenager and rolled her eyes at the tradition, she still smiled for the camera. Those photos lined our hallway, a timeline of her growth, from a gap-toothed little girl to a beautiful young woman. Financial sacrifices became a normal part of life. I took on extra shifts and weekend jobs to make sure Amanda had everything she needed. When she wanted ballet lessons, I found a way to pay for them. When her school organized a trip to Washington, D.C., I worked nights at a warehouse for 3 months to afford it. There were many nights when I ate ramen noodles so she could have a proper dinner. Our home was small but filled with love. A 3-bedroom ranch-style house with worn carpet and outdated appliances, but it was ours. Amanda's room was the one place I splurged, letting her decorate it however she wanted. It went through many phases, from Princess Pink to teenage band posters. I never complained about the holes in the walls from all the redecorating. Each change represented her growing up, finding herself. We had our special father-daughter rituals. Every Sunday, rain or shine, we would go fishing at Lake Mitchell. Amanda was squeamish about putting worms on hooks at first, but eventually became better at it than me. We would talk about everything during those quiet hours on the lake, sometimes catching fish, but always catching up with each other. Teaching her to drive was another milestone. She was so nervous the first time she got behind the wheel of my old pickup truck, gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. We practiced in empty lots for weeks before she felt comfortable enough for actual roads. When she passed her driving test on the first try, I surprised her with a used car. Nothing fancy, a 10-year-old Honda with high mileage, but it was safe and reliable. The hug she gave me made every extra hour of work worth it. Homework became increasingly challenging as Amanda advanced through school. Math especially was beyond my capabilities by the time she reached advanced algebra. I never finished high school myself, getting my GED years later. When I could not help directly, I found resources. We spent many evenings at the public library, and I eventually saved up for a computer so she could research at home. Amanda excelled academically in high school, joining the Honor Society and becoming editor of the school newspaper. Every parent-teacher conference filled me with pride as teachers praised her intelligence and work ethic. She was determined to be the first in our family to attend college, and I encouraged that dream even though I worried about how we would afford it. When she was accepted to an elite university on the East Coast with a partial scholarship, I nearly burst with pride. It was still going to be a financial strain even with student loans and her scholarship, but I would figure it out. I remortgaged the house and took a second job to make it work. The day I drove her to college, helping carry boxes to her dorm room, was bittersweet. I was so proud of her, but dreaded the empty house awaiting me back home. During her college years, our relationship began to change subtly. Her calls home became less frequent, her visits shorter. I noticed new ways of speaking, new interests I could not relate to. Still, whenever we were together, she would hug me tight and say, "Hattie, no matter what happens or where I go, you will always be first in my life." I held on to those words like a lifeline during lonely nights in our too-quiet house. I never imagined those words would eventually prove hollow, that the daughter I sacrificed everything for would one day cut me out of the most important moment of her life. After Amanda's graduation, she moved to Chicago for her first corporate job in marketing. I helped her move, of course, driving the rental truck and carrying furniture up 3 flights of stairs to her first apartment. It was small, but in a trendy neighborhood I could never afford to visit, let alone live in. I was so proud seeing her start her independent life, even as I worried about her being alone in the big city. The first few months, she called me twice a week and came home for weekend visits once a month. We would catch up, and I would send her back with containers of homemade meals to stock her freezer. Gradually, though, the calls became weekly, then bi-weekly. Weekend visits stretched to once every 2 months, then only on holidays. She was building her own life, I told myself. This was normal and healthy. About a year into her Chicago life, Amanda started mentioning a new boyfriend named James. From the snippets she shared, I pieced together that he worked at the same company, in a higher position, came from money, and had graduated from an Ivy League school. She sounded different when she talked about him, more animated, but also somehow less like herself. 3 months later, she asked if she could bring James home for a weekend to meet me. I was thrilled that she wanted to introduce him to her old dad, and spent the week before their visit fixing things around the house that had been neglected. I painted the guest room, fixed the squeaky porch step, and even bought new towels for the bathroom. I wanted James to feel welcome, and I wanted Amanda to be proud of our home. The moment they pulled up in his luxury car, I knew things would be awkward. James stepped out wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He shook my hand firmly, but looked around our neighborhood with barely disguised disdain. Amanda seemed tense, watching his reactions nervously instead of relaxing into being home. Dinner that night was uncomfortable. I had prepared Janet's famous pot roast, a family recipe that had always been Amanda's favorite. James picked at his food, asking if the meat was organic, and commenting that he usually preferred his vegetables less well done. The conversation was stilted with long silences, punctuated by James talking about his family's summer home in the Hamptons and his plans to get an MBA from Harvard. Amanda barely spoke during dinner, and when she did, her voice had a different cadence. She used words that had never been part of her vocabulary, before talking about networking opportunities and luxury brands I had never heard of. When I mentioned Mr. Rodriguez from next door and his funny story about his new puppy, she cut me off mid-sentence, changing the subject to an art exhibition she and James had attended. 2 weeks later, James' parents invited Amanda to their home in Lake Forest for dinner. When she returned, she called me sounding oddly subdued. Their 5-bedroom house had a pool and tennis court, she told me. Their dining room had a chandelier that cost more than my truck. James' father was a corporate lawyer, his mother a former debutante who now chaired charity galas. That was the beginning of the changes in Amanda. Her next visit home, she commented on the worn state of our sofa, suggesting I should replace it. She frowned at the mismatched plates we had always used, asking why I had never bought a proper dining set. She wrinkled her nose at the smell of my aftershave, buying me an expensive replacement that I never used after she left. It smelled like someone else, not me. The criticisms became more frequent and less gentle. Dad, you really should update your wardrobe. Those jeans are at least 10 years old. Dad, could you try not to talk with your accent so much around James? Some of your pronunciations are a bit embarrassing. Dad, maybe do not mention that you work in construction. When you meet James' parents, just say you are in the building industry. Each comment was a small cut, but together they formed a wound that would not heal. The daughter who had once been proud of me, of our life together, now seemed ashamed. The change hurt more than I could express. The first major incident was Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Amanda had promised to come home as she always had. 2 days before the holiday, she called to say she had been invited to spend the weekend with James' family at their lake house. I had already bought all the groceries, including her favorite pumpkin pie. I ate turkey sandwiches alone for a week afterward, unable to look at the set table I had left untouched, in hopes she would change her mind. I tried to bridge the growing gap between us. I bought a smartphone and learned to use it so we could text. I went shopping for new clothes at stores I had never entered before, hoping to look more presentable to her new social circle. I practiced speaking more formally, watching news anchors to mimic their pronunciations. None of it felt natural, but I would have done anything to remain part of my daughter's life. Then came the day I was scrolling through Facebook, something I had learned to do to keep up with Amanda's life since our actual conversations had become so infrequent. There it was, a photo of her with a sparkling diamond ring on her left hand, James beside her beaming. The caption read, "She said yes, I found out about my only daughter engagement through social media, along with hundreds of strangers. When I called her, my voice shaking, she was apologetic. It had all happened so suddenly," she said. James had proposed during a company trip to Paris. They had gotten caught up in the excitement. She promised I would be involved in all the wedding planning, that this was just the beginning of the journey, and I would be right there with her through it all. For a few weeks, that seemed true. She called more often, talking about venue options and color schemes. When I offered to contribute financially, reminding her of the modest savings I had put aside for her wedding, since she was a little girl, she hesitated before saying they were still figuring out the budget. James' family might want to help as well, she added quickly. Over the following months, the wedding conversations became less detailed, her responses to my questions more vague. When I asked about a date, she said they were considering several options. When I inquired about tuxedo rentals, she said it was too early to decide. When I mentioned walking her down the aisle, she changed the subject entirely. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. But a father heart sometimes sees what it wants to needs to. I could not imagine that my only child, the baby I had rocked to sleep through countless nights, the girl whose tears I had wiped away after every fall, the young woman I had sacrificed everything for, would exclude me from the most important day of her life. But that is exactly what she did. It was a Tuesday evening like any other. After a long day supervising a commercial construction site, I came home to my empty house, heated up a frozen dinner, and sat down to check Facebook. This had become my ritual for keeping up with Amanda life since our actual conversations had grown so brief and infrequent. As I scrolled through my feed, a photo posted by one of Amanda's college friends stopped me cold. There was my daughter, radiant in a white wedding gown I had never seen, cutting a multi-tiered cake with James. The caption read, "So happy I could be part of Amanda and James' special day this weekend, most beautiful wedding of the year." The date on the post was Monday, yesterday. The wedding had happened 3 days before that, on Friday. I stared at the screen, uncomprehending. There must be some mistake. These must be engagement photos or perhaps from a bridal shower. But as I clicked on the friend profile and saw more pictures, the truth became undeniable. The flower arrangements, the decorated venue, Amanda walking down an aisle on the arm of a gray-haired man I recognized as James' father. My daughter had gotten married, and I had not even known it was happening. The room seemed to tilt around me as wave after wave of emotion crashed over me. Disbelief came first, a desperate attempt to deny what I was seeing. Then came shock that froze my lungs and made my hands shake uncontrollably. But it was the heartbreak that brought me to my knees, a physical pain so intense I clutched at my chest, wondering momentarily if I was having a heart attack. I scrolled frantically through more photos, each one a fresh wound. There was Amanda dancing with James' father for the traditional father-daughter dance. There she was surrounded by bridesmaids I did not recognize. Another showed James' parents giving a toast, champagne glasses raised high. Every photo showed a joyous celebration, with one glaring absence: me. The venue was clearly expensive, with crystal chandeliers and elaborately decorated tables. Flower arrangements larger than my television adorned every surface. The band appeared to be at least 8 pieces. This was no small, intimate ceremony, as Amanda had vaguely suggested might happen during our increasingly rare conversations. This was an extravagant affair that must have taken months of planning. I tried calling Amanda's cell phone immediately, my fingers fumbling on the screen. The call went straight to voicemail. I called again and again. I left messages that started calmly but grew increasingly desperate. "Amanda, it is Dad. I just saw some photos online. Call me back, please." "Amanda, I need to talk to you right away. Amanda, please, I do not understand what is happening." That night was the longest of my life, worse even than the night Janet died. At least then I had understood what was happening, had been able to say goodbye. This was a different kind of death, a death of trust of the relationship I thought we had. I paced my house until dawn, alternating between sobbing and sitting in stunned silence, surrounded by photos of Amanda growing up that lined my walls. The gap-toothed girl in those pictures seemed like a stranger, now someone I had known in another lifetime. When morning came, I called Amanda Workplace, a marketing firm in downtown Chicago. The receptionist cheerfully informed me that Amanda was out of the office on her honeymoon and would return in 2 weeks. Honeymoon. Another knife twist. In a moment of desperation, I searched through my phone for the contact information James' parents had reluctantly shared during our only meeting 2 years ago. My hands shook as I dialed the number, unsure what I would even say. James' mother answered, her voice cool and precise. Yes, there had been a wedding. Yes, it had been lovely. A proper family wedding, she emphasized. When I asked why I had not been informed, let alone invited, her response cut deeper than any construction accident ever had. Well, Mr. Williams, Amanda felt it would be best this way. Our circle has certain expectations for these events, you understand. Amanda wanted everything to be perfect. I am sure you can appreciate that your presence might have made her uncomfortable given the circumstances. The circumstances. My working-class background. My calloused hands and non-Ivy League education. My very existence as a reminder of Amanda's less polished origins. I do not recall ending the call. I only remember finding myself sitting on Amanda's childhood bed, clutching the handmade quilt Janet had made for her when she was born. The tears came again, but differently now, not the hot tears of shock, but the cold tears of realization. My daughter was ashamed of me, so ashamed that she had cut me out of what should have been one of the most important shared moments of our lives. That night, I wrote Amanda a letter by hand. I poured out everything I was feeling, the hurt, the confusion, the sense of betrayal. I wrote about holding her as a newborn and promising to always be there for her. I described the sacrifices that I had never once regretted making. I asked what I had done wrong, how I had failed her so badly that she would exclude me from her wedding. I ended by saying I would always love her, but that I did not know how we would move forward from this. I did not mail the letter. Not yet. Some part of me still hoped there was an explanation that would make sense of this nightmare, that my daughter had not truly chosen to break my heart so completely. The 2 weeks of Amanda's honeymoon were the longest of my life. I called in sick to work for the first time in years, unable to face people or answer inevitable questions about the wedding. I ignored calls from friends and neighbors. I existed in a fog of pain and confusion, replaying every interaction with Amanda over recent years, looking for the moment when I lost her. When my foreman Frank showed up at my door, concerned about my absence, I broke down and told him everything. He sat with me in shocked silence, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. His parting words stayed with me, Sammy. No job or social status is worth throwing away a father love. That girl is going to regret this someday. Finally, I received a text from Amanda, back from honeymoon, settling into our new place. Hope you are well. Hope you are well, as if we had simply lost touch during a busy week, not as if she had excluded me from her wedding. I did not respond immediately. Instead, I drove to Chicago the next morning, arriving at the address I had for the luxury apartment building where she and James had lived before the wedding. I parked my old truck on the street, looking out of place among the luxury vehicles, and waited. Around 6 in the evening, I saw them, a tanned, smiling Amanda and James, walking hand in hand toward the building entrance. I stepped out of my truck, suddenly conscious of my worn jeans and flannel shirt against their designer attire. Dad. Amanda stopped short, her smile faltering. Her eyes darted around as if checking who might be watching. What are you doing here? I thought we should talk, I said simply. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The lobby of their building was all marble and glass, making my work boots sound unnaturally loud on the floor. The concierge eyed me suspiciously until James nodded at him. We rode the elevator in silence to the 12th floor. Their apartment was stunning with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Modern furniture that looked more decorative than comfortable filled the space. Not a single item looked familiar from Amanda's previous life. All new, all expensive, all selected to fit into this new world she had chosen. "Dad." "You should have called first," Amanda said once the door closed behind us. "We just got back. Things are crazy." "I have been calling," I replied quietly. "For 2 weeks. Since I found out about the wedding from Facebook." Amanda at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. She perched on the edge of a white sofa that probably cost more than my truck. "It was a small family ceremony," she began. "Very last minute. James' parents had a cancellation at their country club and—" "It was 4 days ago," I interrupted, my voice breaking, despite my efforts to stay calm. "Just for the family. Except I am your family, Amanda. Your only family." James, who had been standing by the windows with his back to us, turned around. "Look, Sammy," he said, using my first name in a way that felt deliberately disrespectful. "It was a society wedding. My parents have connections. It needed to be done a certain way." "What way is that?" I asked, looking directly at him. Without her father, Amanda jumped in her words, tumbling out. "Dad, please understand. It was all happening so fast. James' parents were handling everything. They had a vision for how it should be. I just got caught up in it all." "For 2 months?" I asked. Because according to the photos, this was not some thrown-together event. This took planning. Extensive planning. The room fell silent. Then James spoke, his voice cold. "Amanda was concerned you would not fit in with our crowd, that you might feel uncomfortable. She was trying to protect you." I looked at my daughter, waiting for her to contradict him. She did not. She looked down at her perfectly manicured hands, a massive diamond catching the light. "Is that true?" I asked her. "You were protecting me, or were you protecting yourself from having to explain your construction worker father to your new society friends?" Her silence was answer enough. "Dad," she finally said, her voice small. "I wanted a picture. Perfect wedding. Everyone was watching. James' family has a reputation to maintain. I just wanted to fit in. And I would have ruined that perfect picture." I concluded, a strange calm settling over me as the final pieces fell into place. I stood up slowly. "For 25 years, I have been proud to be your father," I said. "I worked double shifts to pay for your education. I went without so you could have opportunities. I cheered at every milestone, supported every dream. But today, for the first time, I am not proud. Not of who you have become or the choices you have made." James stepped forward, his face flushing. "You have no right to speak to my wife that way." I ignored him, keeping my eyes on Amanda. "I hope your new family gives you everything you want, Amanda. I hope the social status and connections are worth what you threw away. Because family, real family, is not about perfect pictures or country club weddings. It is about showing up for each other even when it is inconvenient or imperfect." Amanda was crying now, silent tears tracking through her perfect makeup. "Dad, please. You are overreacting. We can work this out." "I think we already have," I replied. "You have made your choice very clear." I walked to the door, feeling decades older than when I had arrived. In the doorway, I paused and looked back at my daughter, James' arm now around her shoulders. When you were 7, I said you fell off your bike and scraped both knees badly. I carried you 3 blocks home because you were crying too hard to walk. Do you remember what you said to me that night? She shook her head, tears still falling. You said, "Daddy, you will always be my hero." I guess people change. With that, I walked out, closing the door gently behind me. Back home, I gathered every photograph of Amanda, her artwork from elementary school report cards, dried flowers from her high school graduation, the macaroni necklace she had made me for Father Day when she was 6. I placed them all in a large box, added the letter I had written, and sealed it. The next day, I drove back to Chicago and left the box with the concierge of her building. Then I turned off my phone, took a leave of absence from work, and tried to figure out how to live with the hole in my heart where my daughter had been. For 4 months, Amanda and I had minimal contact. She sent occasional text messages that I responded to briefly. "Happy birthday, Dad." "Thanks. How are you doing?" "Fine." She tried calling a few times, but our conversations were strained and brief. I was civil but distant, protecting what remained of my battered heart. Frank and other friends from work checked on me regularly, concerned about my withdrawal. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, brought over casseroles and sat with me some evenings, not asking questions but providing silent companionship. Slowly, I returned to work and established a new normal, though the photos that once lined my walls remained in drawers too painful to display. Then came a Sunday morning in early April. I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when someone began ringing my doorbell repeatedly. Irritated by the intrusion, I opened the door, prepared to tell whoever it was to leave me in peace. What I saw stopped my words in my throat. Amanda was kneeling on my doorstep, makeup streaked by tears, hair disheveled, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, instead of her usual perfectly coordinated outfit. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, clutching something to her chest. It was the letter I had written her after discovering her wedding. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking. "I am so sorry. Please forgive me." My first instinct was to pull her into my arms to comfort her, as I always had when she was hurting. But the wound of her betrayal was still too fresh. I stood frozen in the doorway, torn between parental instinct and self-preservation. What happened, I finally asked, neither inviting her in nor sending her away. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, looking more like the little girl I remembered than the polished woman she had become. "Everything fell apart," she said. "James, the marriage, all of it." I sighed deeply, stepping back from the door. "Come in," I said. "You will give the neighbors something to talk about, kneeling on my porch like that." Once inside, Amanda perched awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, looking around the familiar living room, as if seeing it for the first time. The house she had grown up in suddenly seemed to be a place she no longer recognized. I made coffee and waited, giving her space to collect herself. When I returned with 2 mugs, she had stopped crying, but looked utterly depleted. "James was having an affair," she finally said, staring into her coffee. "With his secretary. The whole time. Even before the wedding." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "I found out 2 weeks ago. Text messages on his phone while he was in the shower. It had been going on for over a year. I confronted him and he did not even try to deny it. He said..." She swallowed hard. "He said he had only married me because I was good for his image at work. That I was presentable enough to be a corporate wife." My heart ached for her pain even through my own hurt. No one deserves such cruelty, especially not from someone who had vowed to love them. But I still did not speak. "His parents were horrible about it," she continued. "They suggested I look the other way. That many marriages in their circle involved these arrangements. When I said I wanted a divorce, they..." She looked up at me, fresh tears spilling. They cut me off completely, said I would not get anything in the settlement because their lawyers would make sure of it. They are already shutting me out of our social circle, spreading rumors about me. And that is when I realized Dad. She reached for the box of childhood mementos that she had brought with her, now on the coffee table between us. I opened this and read your letter every day for a week. I realized I had traded real family for people who never truly cared about me, just about appearances and connections. I threw away the one person who always loved me unconditionally for people who saw me as an accessory. I watched my daughter, the genuine pain in her eyes, the humility in her posture. This was not the polished, distant woman who had excluded me from her wedding. This was Amanda, my little girl, hurt and seeking her father's sanctuary as she had done so many times growing up. And yet, I could not simply pretend the past months had not happened. I am sorry you are going through this, I said carefully. Truly, no one should experience that kind of betrayal. Amanda nodded, wiping at fresh tears. I know you probably hate me, she whispered. I would hate me too. What I did to you was unforgivable. I do not hate you, Amanda, I replied truthfully. I could never hate you. But yes, you hurt me deeply. In a way I never thought possible. She opened the box between us, pulling out the handwritten letter I had left for her. The paper was worn at the edges now, as if it had been read many times. You wrote that you would always love me, but you did not know how we would move forward, she said. Do you think there is a way, Dad? Can you forgive me? Can we try to rebuild what I destroyed? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Behind the sophisticated haircut and designer clothes, I could still see traces of the little girl who had once followed me around with her toy hammer. The teenager who had been so proud to show me her college acceptance letter. The child I had raised alone after losing Janet. It would be easy to say yes, to sweep everything under the rug in relief at having her back. But that would not serve either of us in the long run. Forgiveness is not a light switch, Amanda, I said gently. I cannot simply turn it on because you need me now. It is a process, and it will take time. What you did cut very deep. She nodded, shoulders slumping. I understand, she whispered. I do not have anywhere else to go. My name is still on the lease for my old apartment, but I cannot afford it alone anymore. James froze our joint accounts. The implication was clear. She needed a place to stay, and despite everything, she had come home. I took a deep breath. Your room is still there, I said. It has always been there. You can stay while you figure things out. The relief on her face was palpable, but I held up a hand before she could respond. But if we are going to try to rebuild our relationship, we need honesty between us. Real conversations about what happened and why. I will not pretend the wedding did not happen, or that I was not deeply hurt by your choices. She nodded earnestly. Anything, Dad. I will do anything. I just want my father back. As she spoke those words, something tight in my chest loosened slightly. The path forward would not be easy, but at least there was a path. The first few days with Amanda back in her childhood bedroom were awkward, to say the least. We moved around each other carefully, like dancers unsure of the steps. I would leave for work early, and she would still be sleeping. I would return to find dinner prepared, a peace offering of sorts, though conversation over the meal remained stilted. She spent most days on her laptop or phone dealing with the legal aspects of her separation from James. From fragments of conversations, I overheard his family was indeed making the process as difficult as possible. Their ruthlessness surprised me, though perhaps it should not have. People who could encourage their son to stay in a marriage despite infidelity, who could cut out a father from his only daughter wedding, were capable of many cruelties. On the fifth day, something shifted. I came home to find Amanda in the kitchen, attempting to make Janet famous lasagna, a complex recipe she had never quite mastered. The kitchen was a disaster sauce splattered on countertops, cheese melting unevenly on the pasta. "I think I messed up the bechamel," she said, when she saw me looking so crestfallen that I could not help but laugh. "Your mother ruined it the first 3 times she tried too," I told her, setting down my lunch cooler and rolling up my sleeves. "Let me help." Side by side at the counter working to salvage dinner, we found our first moment of genuine connection since her return. As we cooked, she told me about the job search she had begun, knowing she would need to support herself soon. I listened, offering suggestions about budgeting and interview preparation. It felt normal, or at least a step toward a new normal. That night after dinner, we watched an old movie we had enjoyed together when she was in high school. For 2 hours, the weight of recent events lifted slightly. When the credits rolled, Amanda turned to me, her expression serious. "I need to ask you something, Dad," she said. "And I need you to be completely honest, even if it hurts." I nodded, steeling myself. "Why did you let me back in so easily?" she asked. "After what I did, why did not you turn me away?" I considered the question carefully. "Because you are my daughter," I finally said. "That has not changed regardless of what happened between us. And because I remember what it feels like to need a safe harbor when your world falls apart." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I do not deserve your kindness," she whispered. "It is not about deserving," I replied. "It is about family. Real family." The next morning, I called my foreman and took another week off work. Amanda needed support as she navigated the early stages of her divorce, and I needed time to help rebuild our relationship. Frank was understanding, having seen firsthand how the wedding situation had affected me. During that week, Amanda found a job at a smaller marketing firm with a significant pay cut from her previous position. The work was less prestigious, but offered more creative freedom. More importantly, it was entirely her own achievement, not connected to James or his family influence. I brought her with me to a cookout hosted by my construction crew that weekend. I had avoided social gatherings for months, but it was time to step back into the world. Amanda was nervous, smoothing her simple sundress repeatedly as we arrived. My guys and their families welcomed her warmly. No one asked awkward questions about her marriage or sudden return. Instead, they included her in conversations, shared food and drinks, and treated her like any other guest. By the end of the evening, she was laughing genuinely, for the first time since her return, playing an impromptu volleyball game with Frank's daughters. On the drive home, she was quiet, staring out the window. Finally, she spoke. "Your friends are really nice, Dad. They treat you with so much respect." I glanced at her. "They are good people," I said simply. "Salt of the earth, as your grandmother used to say." "They care about you," she continued. "I could tell by the way they kept checking if you needed anything, how they listened when you spoke." She paused. "I threw away real connections for fake ones, did not I?" It was the opening for the conversation we needed to have, the one I had been waiting for. When we got home, we sat on the back porch with glasses of iced tea and finally talked about the wedding. "I need to understand, Amanda," I said gently. "How did it happen? How did you go from promising I would be involved to excluding me entirely?" She looked down at her hands, no longer adorned with the massive diamond engagement ring. "It started small," she admitted. Comments from James' mother about making sure the wedding reflected their social standing. Questions about my background that made me feel inadequate. Then suggestions about keeping the guest list exclusive. Each comment chipped away at her confidence, she explained. Each raised eyebrow when she mentioned her childhood or my profession made her more insecure. By the time actual wedding planning began, she was desperate to fit into James' world completely. When James' mother suggested a small family-only ceremony, it seemed like an easy solution. No one would have to know about her ordinary origins. She could fully become part of their world. "I did not let myself think about what it would do to you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I just compartmentalized it, told myself I would make it up to you somehow, that you would understand." The more time passed, the harder it became to tell you. I listened to her explanation, feeling the pain of her words, but also beginning to understand. My daughter had been manipulated by people who preyed on her insecurities, who made her feel that her background was something to be ashamed of, rather than the honest foundation it truly was. "But you must have known how much it would hurt me," I said. "That I would find out, eventually." She nodded miserably. "I think part of me wanted to be caught," she admitted, "to be forced to confront what I was doing. By the time the actual wedding came, I was just going through the motions. Everything felt wrong. The dress was what his mother wanted. The venue was their choice. Even our first dance song was their selection. None of it felt like me." As she spoke, I realized that Amanda had been as lost as I had been these past months, just in a different way. While I had been grappling with betrayal, she had been losing herself piece by piece, trying to fit into a world that was never going to truly accept her. "I have one more question," I said. "The father-daughter dance. You danced with James' father." Her face crumpled. "That was the moment I knew I had made a terrible mistake," she said. "Standing there with a man I barely knew, while the DJ announced the father-daughter dance. All I could think was that you should have been there, that you had earned that moment 1,000 times over." We sat in silence as the sun set, both processing the painful truths we had shared. Finally, I reached over and took her hand. "We both have healing to do," I told her. "Me from your choices, and you from the consequences of them. But I think we can find our way back to each other if we keep talking like this. Keep being honest." She squeezed my hand. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to make this right, Dad. I promise." I believed her. The road ahead would not be easy, but at least we were walking it together. Over the next few months, Amanda and I gradually rebuilt our relationship, one conversation, one shared meal, one honest exchange at a time. She found an apartment she could afford, with her new salary, small but comfortable, and I helped her move in, teaching her how to patch walls and fix leaky faucets herself. There was something deeply satisfying about passing on these practical skills, connecting her to the working-class roots she had once tried to escape. The divorce proceedings dragged on with James and his family, fighting every step of the way. They seemed determined to punish Amanda for walking away, using their considerable resources to make the process as painful as possible. There were days when she would call me in tears after meeting with her lawyer, overwhelmed by their tactics and the mountain of legal paperwork. During one particularly difficult week, I surprised her by taking time off work to help her paint her new apartment. As we rolled soft blue paint onto her living room walls, Amanda opened up about her brief marriage in ways she had not before. "He never really saw me, Dad," she confessed, paint roller pausing mid-stroke. "Not the real me. He saw the polished version I created to please him, and when I showed any authenticity, he would correct me. The way I laughed too loudly. How I still sometimes say, 'you guys,' instead of 'everyone.' My excitement over things he considered childish. I listened, recognizing the subtle erosion of self-confidence these criticisms would cause over time. At dinner with his colleagues, she continued, he would squeeze my hand under the table if I was talking too much or sharing the wrong kind of story. At home, he would review my performance, telling me what I did well and what needed improvement, like I was an employee, not a wife. The more she shared, the clearer the picture became. James had not wanted a partner, but a prop, someone to enhance his image without having needs or desires of her own. His betrayal with his secretary suddenly made more sense in this context, a continuation of his pattern of seeing women as interchangeable accessories. "I am sorry you went through that," I told her sincerely. "No one deserves to be treated that way." She shrugged, resuming her painting. "I let it happen," she said. "I was so desperate to fit into that world that I was willing to shrink myself to become whoever they wanted me to be." "But you left," I reminded her. "When many people would have stayed for the security or status, you recognized it was wrong, and you left." A small smile formed on her lips. "I guess I am still your daughter after all," she said. "Too stubborn to stay in a bad situation." I laughed at that. "Definitely my daughter," I agreed. That weekend, Amanda suggested going through some old family albums she had found in her childhood bedroom. We sat at the kitchen table flipping through pages of photographs documenting her growth from infancy to young adulthood. There were birthday parties with homemade cakes, fishing trips where she proudly held up her catch school concerts, where she beamed from the stage. "I was really happy, was not I?" she asked, studying a photo of herself at 12, gap-toothed and grinning beside a science fair project. "You were," I confirmed. "Not because we had much, but because what we had was genuine." She traced the photo with her fingertip. I forgot that somewhere along the way she murmured, "I started believing that happiness came from having the right address, the right clothes, the right connections." We continued through the albums, eventually reaching her high school graduation. I was surprised to find she had saved the program, with her name listed among the honor graduates. Tucked inside was a small note I had written her the morning of the ceremony. "So proud of you, Panda." Her childhood nickname derived from how she had pronounced Amanda as a toddler. "The world is yours for the taking. Love always, Dad." "You kept this?" I asked, holding the worn paper. She nodded. "I took it to college with me. Had it pinned to my bulletin board all 4 years. And somewhere between that hopeful young graduate and now I said something changed." She closed the album slowly. "I think I started measuring my worth by other people's standards instead of my own," she admitted. "By what I could acquire instead of who I was." It was a profound realization, one that many people never reach. I felt a surge of pride in her self-awareness, in her willingness to confront difficult truths about herself. The next day, Amanda surprised me by showing up at my construction site during lunch break. She had never visited me at work before, had always seemed vaguely embarrassed by my profession. She brought sandwiches from my favorite deli and sat with me on a stack of lumber, chatting easily with my crew as they passed by. "I just wanted to see where you spend your days," she explained later, "to understand better what you do." It was a small gesture, but significant, a conscious step toward appreciating the life and work she had once dismissed. As spring turned to summer, Amanda began spending more time with old friends she had neglected during her relationship with James. She reconnected with her college roommate Lucy, who was now teaching elementary school, and with her high school friend Michael, who ran a local coffee shop. These were relationships based on genuine connection rather than social climbing, and I watched with satisfaction as she rediscovered the joy in such friendships. One evening in late July, Amanda and I were having dinner at a restaurant near her apartment when James walked in with a young woman. From Amanda's subtle intake of breath, I guessed this was the secretary he had been involved with. They were seated at a table not far from ours, James not yet having noticed us. I watched various emotions play across Amanda, face, shock, hurt, anger. Then remarkably, a calm settled over her features. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly. "We can leave if you want." She shook her head. "I am fine, Dad," she said, and surprisingly, she seemed to mean it. She continued our conversation, occasionally glancing toward James' table but maintaining her composure. When James finally spotted us, he froze momentarily, then whispered something to his companion. They both looked over the woman with curiosity, James with obvious discomfort. After a moment of indecision, he approached our table, his expression a forced smile. "Amanda," he said stiffly, "you look well." "Thank you," she replied coolly. "I am well." He nodded awkwardly, then glanced at me. "Nice to see you again, Sammy." I merely nodded, letting Amanda handle the interaction as she saw fit. After a few more moments of strained small talk, he returned to his table. As soon as he was out of earshot, I leaned forward. "You okay?" Amanda smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Actually, yes," she said, sounding surprised herself. Seeing him just now, I felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt. Just nothing. "That is a good sign," I told her. "It means you are healing." She considered this, then raised her water glass. "To healing," she said, "and to knowing your own worth." I clinked my glass against hers, pride swelling in my chest. My daughter was finding her way back to herself, stronger and wiser for what she had endured. A year passed. Amanda's divorce was finally settled, with her receiving less than she deserved, but enough to move forward without financial ties to James or his family. She had thrived at the smaller marketing firm, earning a promotion and developing a portfolio of work she was genuinely proud of. Most importantly, she had reclaimed her sense of self, no longer measuring her worth by external validations or social standing. I had officially retired from construction, handing over my supervisor position to Frank, who had been ready for the role for years. At 63, my knees were not what they used to be, and the idea of days not starting at 5 a.m. held increasing appeal. Amanda had helped me plan financially for this transition, proving her marketing skills extended to personal budgeting as well. We had established a new tradition of weekly Sunday dinners, alternating between my house and her apartment. Sometimes we invited others, my neighbor Mrs. Chen, Amanda friends Lucy and Michael, occasionally Frank and his family. These gatherings were simple but joyful, filled with good food and better conversation. One such Sunday, Amanda brought an unexpected guest, a quiet, thoughtful man named David, who taught history at the local community college. She had met him at a fundraiser for the school literacy program, where she had been volunteering. Unlike James, David carried himself with unpretentious confidence, engaging everyone in conversation and offering to help with dishes afterward. After he left, I raised an eyebrow at Amanda. "He seems nice," I commented casually. She blushed slightly. "He is," she agreed. "Very different from before." I could see that clearly. Where James had been all polished surface and sharp edges, David had substance and warmth. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He spoke about his students with genuine care and his modest profession with pride. As we cleaned up the kitchen, Amanda hesitated, then spoke. "Dad, David asked if I would bring him to your birthday gathering next month, if that is okay with you." I smiled. "Of course it is okay. I like him." She looked relieved. "Me too," she admitted. "And he likes you. Actually likes you, not just tolerates you because of me." It was a significant distinction, and we both knew it. 2 weeks later, Amanda called me excitedly. "Dad, I found a place," she exclaimed. "An apartment to buy, not rent. It is small, but in a nice neighborhood. I can afford the mortgage on my salary." I was thrilled for her. This was a concrete step toward building her own future on her own terms. When she asked if I would come look at it with her before she made an offer, I readily agreed. The apartment was indeed small, a one-bedroom unit in an older building, but it had character and potential. High ceilings, hardwood floors that needed refinishing, a tiny kitchen that could use updating. As we walked through the space, Amanda pointed out what she loved and what she would change. "I know it needs work," she said nervously, "but I thought maybe you could help me teach me how to do some of the renovations myself." The request touched me deeply. This was my daughter wanting to learn skills I could teach her, planning to build something with her own hands rather than simply hiring others to create a perfect image. I would be honored, I told her sincerely. We spent the next month planning her renovations, shopping for supplies, and beginning the work of transforming the apartment into her home. I taught her how to sand floors, repair drywall, and install cabinet hardware. She proved a quick study, approaching each task with determination and growing confidence. On a Saturday afternoon, as we took a break from painting her living room, Amanda brought out a wrapped package. "Early birthday present," she explained, handing it to me. Inside was a framed photograph I had never seen before. It showed Amanda and me at her college graduation, both of us beaming at the camera, my arm around her shoulders protectively. The frame was handmade, crafted from reclaimed wood. "David helped me make the frame," she explained. I found the photo while unpacking some boxes. It reminds me of who we were before I lost my way, before I forgot what matters. I studied the image, remembering that day, the pride I had felt watching her receive her diploma, the hope we had both held for her future. Those feelings returned now, but with a depth born of our shared struggles and reconciliation. "It will have a place of honor in my living room," I promised her. The day before my birthday, Amanda called with a change of plans. Instead of going out to a restaurant as we had planned, she wanted to host the celebration at her newly renovated apartment. She had invited a small group: David, my neighbor, Mrs. Chen Frank and his wife, and a few other close friends. When I arrived the next evening, I was struck by how perfectly the space reflected Amanda's true self. The decorations were simple but thoughtful, the furniture comfortable rather than showy. Photos lined one wall, a timeline of our family through the years, including recent ones of our renovation work together. During dinner, Amanda stood and tapped her glass for attention. "I want to make a toast," she announced. "To my dad, not just on his birthday, but for everything he has taught me about what truly matters in life." As she spoke about our journey over the past year and a half, the pain, the healing, the rebuilding, my eyes filled with tears. Around the table, friends nodded in understanding, some wiping away their own tears. "I have learned," Amanda concluded, "that true family stands by you through both joy and pain. That wealth is not measured in bank accounts, but in relationships that withstand the hardest tests. And that sometimes you have to lose something precious to truly understand its value." She raised her glass higher. "To my dad, Sammy Williams, the strongest, most forgiving man I know, I am proud to be your daughter." As glasses clinked and birthday wishes flowed around me, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for too long. The wound of Amanda's exclusion from her wedding would always be part of our story, but it no longer defined us. We had found our way back to each other, stronger for having faced the fracture in our relationship. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Amanda and I stood on her small balcony, looking out at the city lights. She leaned her head against my shoulder, just as she had done as a child, when tired or seeking comfort. "Dad," she said softly, "do you think Mom would be proud of who I have become after everything?" I considered the question carefully. "I think she would be proud of who you are becoming," I answered truthfully. "Of your courage in facing your mistakes and your commitment to living authentically now." Amanda nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "I am trying to be someone worth being proud of," she said. "Someone who values what is real over what just looks good from the outside." In that moment, looking at my daughter silhouetted against the night sky, I knew we would be okay. The path forward would have its challenges, every family does, but the foundation had been rebuilt stronger for having been tested. True family, I had told Amanda during our confrontation after her wedding, is about showing up for each other even when it is inconvenient or imperfect. Now we were both living that truth one day, one honest conversation, one Sunday dinner at a time. I have learned that forgiveness is not a single act, but a continuing choice. That healing comes not from forgetting the wound, but from allowing it to transform you. That sometimes the deepest betrayals can, if we are brave enough to face them, honestly, lead to the most profound growth. My story is not finished, and neither is Amanda. We are still writing it together, page by page, choice by choice. But now we do so with open eyes and authentic hearts, knowing that the picture-perfect life is rarely the one worth living. Have you ever experienced a moment when family betrayal turned into unexpected healing? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. And remember, sometimes the deepest wounds can lead to the greatest healing if we are brave enough to face them with honesty and love. Thank you for listening.